Welcome back to Talk Today. The time is 7:22. We'll have the papers in just a moment, but here is what else is coming up on today's programme.
Well, we'll be heading to Cumbria just after 7:30, where thousands of residents remain without power after their properties were cut off by heavy snow.
The Wonka Wake Up at 8:45 will be asking whether old literature should be adapted for modern audiences after the release of the latest Roald Dahl movie.
And we'll be finishing things at the High Court at 9:20, where Prince Harry resumes his battle with the Home Office after a decision was made to remove his police protection.
Well, let's take another look at some of this morning's front pages, all focusing on the government's tough migration stance.
Well, the Times lays out the Tories' new 5-point plan, which includes tougher rules on working visas and bringing over relatives.
Moving over to the Telegraph, it says the Home Secretary's plans could cut arrivals by a quarter and see salary thresholds increased.
And access denied, blast the Sun, as they claim that enough is enough as the government plans to slash the influx of net migration by 300,000. Well, Labour advisor Mike Buckley and broadcaster Emma Wolfe are back with us for another look through this morning's papers. Welcome back, both. Emma, you've got a story for us from the Mirror.
Yeah, indeed. This is... do you guys have smart meters?
Yes.
Do you?
No,
Yes.
I'm not allowed to have one in our flat. Yeah, there's something about the electricity, but I desperately want one.
You want one, and I have told them time and time... I've resisted one
Yes.
for years and years and years, and I've said, no, I don't want a smart meter, and you can actually say you don't want a smart meter.
Why don't you want one?
I don't want... Well, firstly, I don't want this thing going, you've spent £17.60. I think it kind of creates anxiety. I don't really want to... I mean, I'm careful, I'm careful with electricity use and whatever, but I don't want that constant reminder. And also, I just think it's invasive, and I would prefer to read the gas meter, send the thingy in, the electricity meter gets read somewhere else in our property. I don't know what. So, yeah, I'm not into smart meters. Anyway, apparently nearly 3 million of the 33 million meters that have been installed are not so smart after all. They're very dumb. About 1 in 10 of these meters have not in smart mode due to technical issues. And what's happening is that customers are being sent incorrect bills.
No.
Well, more than that, they were actually being debited from their accounts as well.
They're actually paying. And the thing that worries me about this is that I think it's vulnerable and elderly customers who, unlike me, can't say, I don't want it. They have them forcibly. I mean, they can forcibly install them, which is really, really wrong. They don't give you much choice unless you say, actually, no, I don't want one. And it's the vulnerable, the elderly, who kind of don't get it, don't know how to challenge, don't really... Does anyone understand their electricity and gas bills? I don't.
No.
You know, they're so unclear.
But how do they compare to just sending your reading off? Because even that has got its flaws, hasn't it?
Yeah, but you're in control. You know what money is going in and coming out, whereas these are being, as David says, automatically debited, but amounts are not being sort of run past you. If it seems very, very high, the money's just being taken out. And I think a lot of people don't know how to say, no, that's incorrect, that seems too high, I want that money back, the direct debit, all of that. So
But I think,
Mike,
this plays to a recurring theme, actually, about elderly people who are the ones who won't complain, who may not see what their smart meter is doing. I had a problem for 2 years where I couldn't get onto the right tariff. I was meant to be on 2 tariffs, day and night tariff. They kept me on a single tariff. And I'm David, I complain the most, so I kept complaining.
But also, we're online, we get it, we're vaguely digital. Older people feel very, very frightened by this whole world, this world where everything is moving to digital. You can't get good deals if you're not online. Like, there's a lot of ways in which they are disadvantaged in this new era.
And they make it needlessly complicated as well. I mean, I moved house, when I moved house last time, I had to switch provider. Went on to my new provider. They shall remain nameless for the purposes of this conversation. They had 741 different tariffs. In what world...
How are we meant to make sense of that?
In what world is that... Exactly. It's not there to provide a service to the customer. It's just simply there to overwhelm you with information so you think, oh, I can't be bothered. I mean, literally no human being has time to go through 741 different tariffs. So you end up just picking the default one, which is probably way more expensive than one of the other ones. But how are you supposed to know?
And so there's another point to this, which is the meter needs to be connected to the internet. It needs to also connect to your boiler. So there are a number of steps that have to be in place for it to work.
That's why we can't have one, yeah.
Right, so that's why you need to have all of these steps in place to make sure it works. Now, if it doesn't work and if it doesn't provide a reading, the electricity company can estimate your bill. And of course, are they going to estimate down? No.
No. This is why I loved living on a canal boat for 5 years, because you'd buy your gas canister, you'd buy your
Sounds
wood
hideous.
and your coal.
Every time you bring up the canal boat, I literally get the shivers, yeah.
No, but I knew...
And I know where you were. I think you were on the Regent's Canal
I
as
was
well.
indeed.
Oh, my God.
Yes, and I knew what was going
in
out
that
and in.
water. I know you're in a boat, but it's very cold when you're inside water.
And you're very vulnerable.
It was
I think.
toasty
They look
warm
quite
on
snug,
Nora.
though. When you go past and you see the wood fires burning.
You can come over. We'll have a night on
my
Nora,
God.
have some Prosecco once I can drink again. Right, next story, Mike. Front page of The Guardian. This sounds terrifying. It's
I mean,
about
it is.
nuclear power plant.
It is terrifying, genuinely, because apparently groups linked to Russia and China, possibly others, have been hacking the Sellafield nuclear site right up to the highest level of their information about the movement of nuclear materials and storage of nuclear materials, etc. Not just recently, but since 2015.
Wow.
And the powers that be at Sellafield, they didn't, apparently for years, didn't even inform the nuclear regulator. In the UK, Sellafield got put under special measures because they weren't handling data properly or reporting information properly. So we could all have been put at serious risk. I mean, a major disaster could have happened, because it's not as if Russia and China are particularly well-intentioned. So I don't know whether this has now been fully resolved, but clearly we need much better systems and structures in place and much better safety procedures at Sellafield and indeed other nuclear
Is this why
sites
Oliver
in the country
Dowden's
if we're
saying
gonna be kept safe.
we need to stock up on
Candles and
candles and
torches.
Well, I'm
torches?
sorry, if there's a major nuclear disaster, having a torch and a wind-up radio ain't going to help you out very much.
No, but I think this speaks to a much bigger issue, which is why we're allowing foreign countries to own our critical national infrastructure. When you look at some of our power stations, actually almost the majority, it's about 97% owned by foreign entities. That cannot be right, can it, in a deeply insecure world?
It cannot be right, and absolutely. And the main thing that we need, that we've talked about for the past year non-stop, is energy security since, Ukraine, Russia. And also, why did we not know about this? Why is it just coming out now?
I don't know what's just coming out, but I mean, good on The Guardian for doing this investigation, to be quite honest. I don't know. I assume that Sellafield is owned by the state, but I don't think it's been sold off, but it may have been. We have sold off ludicrous amounts of our national infrastructure, I agree, very sadly.
We have, and it seems to me we don't have a concerted plan, a 20-year plan, a 30-year plan. We talked about energy earlier. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we actually saying, we're here, in 50 years we want to be here, this is how we get there?
Well, I would imagine this will all come after the next
Short-termism.
election. Just hold your breath slightly on that one and you'll be fine.
The short-termism.
Shall we move on? Rail strikes are continuing, as we know. The RMT have now settled. We've got ASLEF strikes taking place. They've been offered 4% plus 4%, 8% in total over 2 years. But given the fact that you can't get on a train, and it's been going on for, 2 years now, train fares are going up.
Train fares are going up. This is part of the government's drive to simplify train fares. So they're scrapping off-peak. So it means if you go into London at a sort of off-peak time, then you want to go out and leave London and go home between 4 and 7, you're going to be paying more. It's so complicated. It's a bit like the sort of energy tariffs thing. So complicated to try and work out, do you buy 2 singles, do you buy 2 returns? The absolute misery of the public travelling experience cannot be overstated. Trains are expensive, dirty, delayed, freezing cold, mostly chaotic.
Can't get a seat.
Can't get a seat, absolute nightmare. So now they're scrapping super off-peak, and also at a time when lots and lots of rail infrastructures were going on. We've just seen what were the fat cats yesterday having a huge jolly with all the Labour MPs at the taxpayers' expense. I mean, really, in terms of infrastructure, I think transport in this country is, well, I'm sure Norman Baker was telling you that, it's just on its knees.
Mike?
I mean, transport's a mess in this country, again, just because of, basically 13 years of underinvestment. But it also goes further back than that. I mean, the deregulating the buses, which was Thatcher, back in the 80s, has caused absolute carnage. I mean, we were reading, I think, last week, that bus services across the country are down by about half since 2008.
No wonder
which
people
was just
want to
absolutely
drive.
dire. But then the government's like, well, why aren't people going to work? Well, they can't get there, mate.
Well, I think
if you can't afford a car and there isn't a bus and the trains aren't running, you can't get there.
But you say underinvestment. We've actually bailed out the railways by £1 billion.
That doesn't mean that they're in fit condition, though. I mean, this is long term.
No, the government is bailing out the railways.
We've had to
keep them
since
afloat.
COVID.
But
of course,
also,
for the decade before that, we weren't investing in the railways.
But the other issue is what the government did in COVID. Because of furlough, it meant people don't come in anymore. So we're going to talk about this later. Monday and Friday working is pretty much out, which means the revenue for the railways is reduced. So therefore, they need to put their fares up.
Absolutely, and there are so many other businesses that are impacted by this whole, putting the country into the deep freeze, putting the economy into the deep freeze for 2-3 years. I think it was absolutely catastrophic, but yeah, massively impacted.
But we do have, this does impact productivity and growth. I mean, I learned only yesterday at an event I was at that we have the third longest commute of all of the OECD countries, so developed countries in the world, so in Europe, Canada, States, Australia, etc. We've got the third longest commute, so it's taking longer for us to get there, longer for us to get back. People spend less time in work. People are more tired. People have less time with their families. I'm sure
But
that
no one
probably...
can live in London because property prices
and
are
it probably puts
astronomical,
people
so they
off
have to
going
live
to
out.
work, or it just means that they can't do it because they think, well, I've got to do an 8-hour day. It's going to take me an hour to get there, whatever it is, but I've got childcare issues. Well, I simply can't do it then.
Well,
Whereas in other countries, they get there a hell of a lot quicker.
That segues us nicely into the
Well, it
next story,
does.
Mike. In the Telegraph, COVID handouts have made people less willing to work.
Well, I have to say I'm sceptical of this story. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm not convinced by the evidence that's been presented.
I'm with you.
Because it's
I'm not with you.
It's some random bank, basically, that's decided this, rather than it being something by the ONS or a government department or anything that looks particularly robust, if I'm honest. So there may be truth to this, I don't know. But regardless, I mean, what else could the government have done in the pandemic? It couldn't let everybody starve. If you're saying
Exactly.
you
Not
cut...
lock down the entire country?
Well, they had to do that, otherwise countless more people
No,
would
they
have
didn't.
died.
There
They
was
didn't
no
have to
evidence
lock down the
of
entire
lockdown
country.
whatsoever.
Yes,
The
there
first
No,
was.
they didn't.
We
The
don't,
first
we really
one coming
don't
It was
just
an
have this
appalling
conversation
thing to
again.
do, and
It was
look what it's done
appalling.
to our
I
country.
agree.
We don't need to have this
I will
conversation again.
never, ever,
Countless more people would have died
ever
had they not
support
done
that.
it.
That's
And
also
indeed,
not true,
However,
Mike.
this
It's
story-
absolutely not
This-
true.
they should have locked down earlier than they did.
This story is focusing on COVID
It is.
handout.
Well done,
Yes.
bringing it back.
There
Like
we
it.
go,
Oh,
bringing
yes.
it back. And I had a COVID handout during that period. I was self-employed and I would not have been able to
But you
survive
see,
because
but
I
a
lost so
million
much
small
work.
businesses got no help whatsoever,
Which was
and
awful.
that is absolutely appalling.
Yeah,
but
it is
also, what
appalling.
this does do,
But it didn't make me less willing
no, but
to
what,
work.
but what?
No,
we
of course it didn't.
No, but we have
And for the
seen-
vast majority,
paid
it won't have
tax
made
on
them
it.
less willing
But we
to work.
have seen that people are less willing to do a 5-day week. When you actually interview people for jobs, they say, I don't want to work 5 days a week. Well, I'm sorry, you have to. That is what the job is.
I mean, I just think that's in a way, it's quite rational. We've all been through a major life-changing event. I think we've all learned that life is fragile and that our lives are finite. Obviously, most of the people who died of COVID had vulnerable conditions or they were elderly or whatever, but we all saw the headlines of 32-year-old bodybuilder gets COVID, 3 days later, boom, they're dead. Understandably,
Probably 'cause he had
maybe
the
people want to
vaccine.
spend a bit less time in work and a bit more time with their families, a bit more time enjoying themselves.
But what's their link?
That's perfectly rational.
In this bank's research, what is their direct link between handouts and unwillingness to work?
I don't know if there is any clear. I presume
That they were given
they're-
free money.
I presume that they're
basically.
intimating people who've decided, well, I can just
It was
stay
a
home and the
limited
government
amount
will
of
pay
free
for
money.
me.
That's not going to last
well,
into
it was a
2024.
It was a limited
is it?
amount for a limited time.
But I think what
you
it
know.
did is change people's mindsets. And certainly as someone who got no help from the government during COVID, it was a really tough time. I had to take a bounce back loan out to actually stay afloat. Many of my friends did get handouts. They were there at home having a lovely time. They were tending their begonias, doing their gardening and having a great time.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I agree.
Because
I
they
mean,
couldn't work.
This was Rishi Sunak's choice. I mean, he chose to help people on PAYE. He chose to help the self-employed. Small
Yeah.
business owners, there's about 3 million of them in the country. They got zero help. Loads of businesses went under. Again, the government complained about productivity problem. They let countless, thousands of businesses go to the wall in the pandemic because they refused to help them out.
Yeah.
And then they're complaining that people aren't starting businesses. It's ludicrous.
I'm going to... Oh, sorry.
So I was just going to say, haven't we lost our work ethic?
I do think that if you
I don't
put
think so.
people
Speak for
on...
yourself. I'm
I asked
full-term
Emma.
pregnant.
If you had...
Emma.
Let me go home.
I think you're
I am
working
not
incredibly
convinced by
hard
this
for someone
story,
who's 8 and
is
a
the
half months
conclusion.
pregnant.
And I think people...
No, I agree with...
everybody
I'm
worked
afraid
very
I
hard
agree
in
with
this
David
country.
on this. I think if you give people free money, don't hit me. If you give people money and handouts, and look, the country could not afford that, and look where we are now. I think the state of the country right now tells you everything you need to know
The economy isn't
about the
isn't
effect
in a
of
state
lockdown.
because of the COVID handouts. at
Yes,
all.
it is.
No, it isn't.
It's in a-
the
it was
economy's
an
in the economy's in a state
appalling
because of austerity and Brexit. Liz Truss and Rishi
That is
Sunak.
utter
That's why the
nonsense.
economy's in the
Speaking
state.
of austerity, bar humbug. Scrooge is back this Christmas because festive treats are going to be smaller because of shrinkflation.
Right, the shrinkflation thing where they make everything smaller. So apparently you used to get 8 penguins, those chocolate bars in a pack, and now you get 7, same price. All the festive treats, so chocolate bars, tins of biscuits, mince pies, cheese, everything soaring in price and getting smaller. And food is the biggest cost for people at Christmas. It's one of the the main things they spend their money on. That's going to be hiked by £25 this year. And it's just a disaster. Shrinkflation.
Well, also, if you buy a box of chocolates, there's nothing in it.
Nothing in them. It's mostly packaging.
No
isn't it?
crisps in a crisp packet anymore.
No. And also,
Face
they're blown
cream.
up.
Face cream. I opened a face cream the other day. Half of it was empty air in a great big lid.
Yes.
What's that about?
What do
Face
we-
creams, Mike?
Beard,
creams?
beard shampoo?
My beard shampoo is just fine, thanks very
Yeah.
much.
Do you
Have you
do you
noticed the
think the
shrinkflation?
retailers, though,
I haven't in beard shampoo.
Taking
Well, no, I haven't.
the-
noticed
do you think the
it.
retailers are swinging the lead here? They're using this idea and they're actually inflating their costs
they
or their
are.
prices because they can.
I mean, possibly in some instances, but I think mostly it's due to bad governance and the cost of living crisis and inflation and the increased costs that traders face because of Brexit, to be quite frank.
Nothing to do with
Wait,
Brexit.
they're shrinking the boxes
knew
of
you were gonna say
biscuits.
that.
They're shrinking the boxes of biscuits because of the government.
Because of Brexit.
Well, thanks
well,
to Emma and Mike for
Must
joining
be
us
that.
this morning.
It's increased cost of trade, hasn't it?
They will stop arguing shortly so I can finish this link, and they will be back with more papers in just under an hour.